You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 288. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are diving into part 2 of a 2-part look at being a thoroughbred versus a workhorse when it comes to our energy styles. So last week we dove into, frankly, one of my new favorite concepts or frameworks that I've been exploring with clients, which is all about this idea of whether we work better as a workhorse or a thoroughbred when it comes to managing our energy and really uncovering our natural energy rhythms and how those influence the way we show up each day. So last week we explored what it means to operate like a workhorse with that steady, persistent effort, or more like a thoroughbred, living in that high energy burst followed by intentional recovery and rest periods. We talked about how both of them are fantastic. The important thing is learning which one you are so you can work with it. And today what we're going to do is take that understanding even further. We're going to explore how to use these insights that you've gathered over the week to tackle your goals and tackle your projects in a way that feels doable, supportive, sustainable. So whether you're building a habit or you're working toward a creative project or you're navigating just a particularly busy season of life, this episode is here to help you align your goals with your natural energy so that it's done sustainably. Now, as I mentioned last week, if you have an ADHD brain like mine, there's a good chance you lean more toward the thoroughbred side of energy. We talked about how you can be both for sure. But what I've found to be true is that a lot of us ADHDers tend to tip more toward the thoroughbred energy, especially when it comes to our big projects and goals, hyperfocus and intense energy and the bursts of creativity, right? These all may be quite familiar to you. Now, with that being said, we may also notice how the workhorse shows up in different areas of our life. For example, maybe some of you are workhorses when it comes to social engagements, and you do really well with those regular, steady touch points of interaction with other people, and you don't really need much recovery time on the other side. Unlike a thoroughbred in the social situation where they might go in and be around a lot of people, but then they need a lot of recovery time on the other side. So by the end of this episode, my goal for you is that you walk away with practical tools to work with your energy type based on what you found over the last week. And if you are a combination of both, I got something for you too. So let's start talking about some practical strategies, okay? And we're going to start with a look at the workhorse, the type of energy that's pretty persistent. Yes, sometimes we need a break, and it's not 100% of the time, right? We are humans, but the workhorse tends to show up pretty regularly and does better with that persistent routine, okay? Workhorses thrive on that steady progress. They excel at showing up day after day, taking those small, regular steps that build the momentum over time. So this steady approach is really supportive for situations like habits, routines, goals that benefit from the gradual, sustained effort, okay? For a workhorse, it's not really about the big leaps. It's about continuing to put one foot in front of the other and trusting that those steps do add up and making the effort to recognize that. Now, again, you may not really see this nature in much of what you do. Like I mentioned, a lot of ADHDers tend to lean toward the thoroughbred, but I'm guessing you probably notice it in a couple of areas. For example, with movement. When it comes to movement, I am not a thoroughbred. I am not someone who wants to train for some super intense marathon or triathlon or anything like that. But I do know I want to move each day. And it's going to be a little bit, I'm not going to go for some 3-hour run as I train for a marathon or something, right? It's going to be walking Bruno, or I do a 30-minute lifting session, or I dance. It's a combination of different types of activities, a little bit each day. That's what feels best for me. That's what feels best for my body. But When it comes to projects in my business, projects around the house, that's a horse of a different color. Okay. That's when I tend to go all in thoroughbred energy. So if we stick with the workhorse concept, one of the biggest strengths of a workhorse is that they can lean into this predictability. They can count on themselves to show up, like I said, at least 80-85% of the time, and they know that they're going to make that progress. And while it might feel slow, it might feel incremental at times, over time, it's there. They can see these powerful shifts. They see that compounding effect that happens as they move one step closer toward their goals. So for those of you who are listening and you find that you do align more toward the workhorse energy, or there's particular areas of your life where you'd like to be able to lean into the workhorse energy and support it more fully, this is an opportunity to structure your goals around daily milestones or routines. This can be incredibly effective. So for instance, let's say you're writing a book or something, okay? Instead of diving into massive multiple day writing sessions, maybe you tell your brain, I should just get a cabin and write all weekend and finish the thing. Instead, you would focus on a more traditional setting aside 30 minutes most mornings to focus on one small piece of the writing. Because that thoroughbred of renting a cabin for a week or something and just writing would be too much for the workhorse. Okay? So for the workhorse, when you're working toward a goal, a project, what have you, going to the more traditional setting aside of a regular recurring time frame where you can work on that project is going to be really supportive. Maybe it's, if we use the book example, sitting down and writing a single page, or writing for 30 minutes, doesn't matter how many words you get out, or outlining a chapter, or revising a specific passage, whatever. The key here for the workhorse is regularly returning to those behaviors so that the progress becomes a habit, it becomes inevitable. So for the workhorse, tools like Traggit Happers, habit trackers, tools like tools like habit trackers or progress logs can be especially helpful for the workhorses. So they provide this clear visual representation of your efforts. They give you that tangible reminder right there in front of you visually of how far you've come. They help you see the gains over the gaps. I'm telling you, checking off a habit tracker, it might seem simple, like, oh, big deal. But as someone who does love a good filled out habit tracker, it can be so motivating for that workhorse energy style because it acts as a visual celebration of your persistence, of your progress. And you can look at it and go, heck yeah, self, thanks for showing up. Look how far we've come. So essentially, if you tend to lean into the workhorse tendency more often, or for the areas in your life where you are more of the workhorse energy, I encourage you to really lean into that strength of persistence because it's there for you. Use the tools and the routines to help you keep yourself on track and to celebrate the progress that you're making, big and small. Because for a workhorse, it's important to see that. When it is that gradual progress, we need to recognize it and celebrate it in order to help maintain that momentum even further. So we've talked about the workhorse. Now let's talk about the thoroughbreds. So the thoroughbreds tend to thrive in bursts of focused energy. Thoroughbreds are the sprinters of the energy world. They are capable of tackling a whole lot in a short amount of time when they're in the zone. And this intense focus is such a powerful strength, especially for the high impact tasks or those creative projects. But the catch here is that thoroughbreds need that intentional recovery time to recharge as well, because without it, the sprint can quickly run us right into burnout, that dreaded crash, which so many of us ADHD brains know all too well. So for thoroughbreds, structuring goals, structuring projects that work with this rhythm rather than against it is especially critical. Especially because a lot of thoroughbreds try to fit themselves into the workhorse mold, but they're going at thoroughbred pacing. So a great way to work with the thoroughbred energy is to create intentional sprint days in your schedule. So these are the days when you fully lean into that focused, intense energy. You tackle the big ticket item, you go all in, and you really focus on that thing that needs your undivided attention. But then you also pair those sprint days with the lighter, low energy recovery days. And you do this because that's what allows you to sustain your momentum. That's actually what's required. Just as the workhorse needs the regular smaller amounts every day, and then they have the recharge at the end of the day, the thoroughbred needs the all in, but they also need the complete rest. So this is what I do with podcast day on Mondays, okay? So podcast day is an all in day. It's an 8-hour thing. I'm all in, I'm doing all the things. And then I pair that with CEO day on Tuesday, which is much lower energy. I get coached from my coach, and then I do a lot of the lower demand admin things. I create my Instagram reels, I schedule my newsletters, I respond to emails, that kind of thing. All of the administrative side of the business. For you, maybe you're planning an event, and so you dedicate a couple of high energy days to mapping things out and confirming the details and mapping out the major events and all the different components that are really intensely time demanding and energy demanding in that planning process. But then you have a couple of recharge days on the other side where you review the smaller details, you catch up on some admin or the emails that came in at that time. Maybe you go run some errands, you have to get decorations or something, So this ebb and flow really allows you to harness your burst of energy without exhausting yourself. So one of my clients recently really started playing with this idea, and she adopted a 2 days on, 2 days off structure. So she developed her sprint days to do her deep focus work. These are the high energy tasks, the things that really demand no distraction, and she goes all in. But then she builds those 2 recovery days on the other side that allow for the focus on lighter, low energy activities. And fortunately, she did have a boss who was on board with this just to play with it and see how it worked. Okay, I know that not everybody has a schedule that allows for this, but also challenge your brain. If it's just like, that's not possible for me, well, maybe. What if we played with that? Maybe it could work, okay? But for this client, by planning her time in this way, she was avoiding the burnout after going all in by balancing her workload with the lighter things on the 2 days off, right? That lighter load. For many of us with ADHD, this thoroughbred energy, like I said, feels especially familiar when it comes to big projects, big creative work. That hyper-focused energy can be a real strength if we can tap into it in a way that is intentional. And it can allow us to really get into it and make that quick, powerful progress. But where it gets tricky is if we're not planning for the recovery. The pendulum then just swings too far and we just get left in this slump with nothing to help us climb out of the hole. I'm mixing analogies here, but we just really deplete ourselves because we didn't plan for the rest. So to avoid this, we really want to create the intentional, not accidental, but intentional recovery time. Because what happens for most of us, if we are in thoroughbred energy, is that we push ourselves, we keep pushing ourselves, and then we push ourselves all the way to depletion because we think we should be working at workhorse pace as a thoroughbred. And we never have that recovery time. So it's so important that we build that in. We need to think of that as part of the productivity process. It's part of the framework. It's not some weakness that we can't keep running at that same pace. No. If you're a sprinter in the Olympics, you're not sprinting at the speed that the marathoner is running their marathon. It just doesn't work that way. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're scheduling in a way that aligns with your energy type. So for example, after 2 days of intense focus on a project, maybe you plan a couple of days of those lighter activities like organizing your workspace or doing some reading. Maybe you're just relaxing. I don't know. But by giving yourself that permission to rest, you're setting yourself up for another productive work sprint on the other side. So if you resonate with the energy of the thoroughbred, okay, remember your bursts of focused energy, they are an incredible strength, 100%. But the key here is to balance those bursts of energy with recovery so that you're not constantly running on empty. You're not in burnout. By structuring your goals and your projects around that natural rhythm, I'm telling you, you can achieve some amazing results without sacrificing your well-being. So let's talk about a practical strategy, okay? Let's talk about how we can create flexible schedules that can honor really both the workhorse or the thoroughbred style and give you some tools, some action steps to help you work with your energy style to reach your goals. So one of the most effective strategies that I've been playing with in terms of working with your natural energy patterns is creating a menu or a list of tasks tailored to your different energy levels. Now, I find this tool to be especially helpful for the thoroughbred energy type because it allows you to really offload some of the decision making. It allows you to offload unnecessary demands on your executive functions, and it gives you a clear plan for those low energy days when focus feels elusive. And it also helps ensure that you're making the most of your high energy days when you're ready to dive into those big, impactful tasks. Okay, so let's talk about how we can create those personalized menus, those lists for high energy and low energy tasks. For example, let's start with some potential items that might be in your low energy lists. These are the things that you can do when you're not feeling particularly focused, not feeling particularly motivated, but you know you want to show up and still do some things, okay? So these might be responding to certain emails, cleaning out your inbox, organizing your workspace or your files, updating your calendar, mapping through your to-do list, updating that, maybe some light planning or some brainstorming, that kind of thing without diving into the real meat of the planning, okay? So these might be items that show up on your low energy list, okay? And I also want to acknowledge, of course, it's going to be different for everybody. Some people would find making phone calls and appointments on the phone to be low energy. And for me, that is very high energy, okay? So it's going to be different for everybody. But as an example, again, on the flip side, high energy menu is for those days when you're fully in the zone. You're ready to tackle the big, impactful projects, the important things that require a lot of focus and effort. So these activities might be fully mapping out all the different steps of your new project or your goal, or diving deep into the work, actually doing the work, writing the chapter of the book, creating that presentation, tackling the next major milestone of finalizing a proposal or launching that offer or whatever, okay? We want to take some time to clarify what's on your high energy and low energy list. So for example, another one of my clients created their own list of high energy and low energy tasks, and they did that in a way that really supports their profession and their thoroughbred energy. Okay, so this person is an artist, and on their recovery days, they focus on cleaning up their workspace, like literally cleaning brushes and things, sketching out ideas, responding to inquiries, updating new pieces on Instagram or on their website or whatever. These are all low effort tasks for them that they do want to get done, but they also know they don't want to be doing those things when they're at their creative best. Okay. And then on their sprint days, when they're all in, they essentially just have one main task on their high energy list, which is get into the studio and paint. That is the thing. And they did break it down a little bit more, but essentially it was do the thing, get in there and paint. So this approach allowed them to continue creating and producing their art without burning out, because they'd have their longer stretches of being in the studio time, creating, painting, doing that work. And then on the other side, they would have their recovery days where they're doing some of the back end and tidying and washing the brushes and posting on Instagram of the latest thing they created. So they have that support and they're able to move forward on their goals no matter how their energy shifted. And they built a schedule that honored what they've discovered of 2 days on, 1 to 2 days off. And by off, I mean the low energy type activities. Now, for those of you who tend to align more with the workhorse energy when it comes to your goals and your projects, you may find it helpful to think of your different lists actually more like a roadmap than a menu. So in this situation, you might try organizing your map where you essentially break out that big goal, that big project into smaller tasks, and you spread it out over several days and weeks. Now, of course, you want to do this with any energy type. You want to know what the overarching goal is. But for the workhorse, it can actually be quite effective to map out that goal and use those as your benchmarks of your daily activities. This is the more traditional goal setting framework, which can be incredible for the brains who find it supportive. So if that's you, amazing, go all in. And then for those of us who are thoroughbreds out there, creating that menu that includes recovery support and includes rest time and downtime where you focus on the lighter tasks that you still want to get done, but won't drain you completely, that's really important. So make sure that you are not trying to force your thoroughbred energy into the workhorse style. And similarly, for the workhorses, if you love that you can show up and go all in for a short amount of time and then rest it right after that, and you are able to maintain that, that's incredible. Make sure you protect those routines because that's what's supportive for you. Now, whether you are primarily a workhorse or primarily a thoroughbred, it's always important to remember that your menu or your tasks, your project, your roadmap, whatever you're using, it isn't set in stone. It's absolutely okay to iterate. Okay, so as you use these supports, you can note what works, what doesn't. Are there tasks that you had put in the low energy list, but they're actually higher energy than you realized? Not a problem, swap it out, okay? Or do you find that a particular high energy task is too much? It just is so draining. If so, can we break it down into smaller steps? By recognizing whether you are a thoroughbred or a workhorse or a mixture of both, depending on the situation, you can start creating supports that actually fit you. And you're building a framework that supports you in any kind of season or any kind of day. So as a quick recap, this week, we took the concept of the workhorse versus thoroughbred energy, and we applied it to our goals, our projects, our daily tasks. And we explored how workhorses can lean into that strength of persistence and predictability and use this steady incremental progress over time, using things like habit trackers or progress trackers and mapping things out in a more traditionally linear way. We then also talked about how thoroughbreds can harness their strengths of those bursts of intense, focused energy where they create a lot in a short amount of time, and the importance of planning intentional recovery to sustain their efforts for the long term. So whether your strengths are in the steady rhythm of the workhorse or the dynamic sprint of the thoroughbred, the key takeaway here is this. It's your energy that is your strength, full stop. Whether you're the workhorse or the thoroughbred, the strength is the energy type and working with it. By working with your natural rhythms, your natural energy, and using tools like your task menus of high energy and low energy, or those structured routines that feel really supportive and fuel your energy, you can align your approach to goals in a way that feels both supportive and sustainable. So this week, I invite you to try creating your own task menus based on what we talked about here. If you lean more toward the workhorse energy, you might use the roadmap approach where you're kind of mapping out the steady progress and alternating between slightly higher energy, slightly lower energy, so that you maintain that regular recurring momentum. And if you're more of a thoroughbred energy, let these menus guide your recovery days as well as your sprints. Build one for low energy tasks and one for high energy tasks, and then experiment with using them in a way that feels really supportive for you. Let them inform the sprints and fuel your recoveries as well. And as you work with these different menus, notice what's working, notice what could use an adjustment. Treat it like an experiment and give yourself permission to refine as you go along. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you are ready to take these concepts even further, if you want to apply what you learn in the podcast to your life and learn how to work with your ADHD in a way that actually works for you, I invite you to check out today's show notes where you can learn more about working together both one-on-one and in my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome. Also, if you want to learn my simple step-by-step approach to locking in a routine and making it stick, be sure to check out my free training called the ADHD Routine Revamp. You can grab it now through the link in the show notes or head to imbusybeingawesome.com/routine to sign up. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.